Warhammer 40,000 Chaos
Chaos.
Looks like chaos has been waiting for us.
Not that chaos, but Chaos Gate Demon Hunters. Apart from being a mouthful, this is the latest of many games that borrow the Warhammer IP. It's actually one of the good games that manages to capture some of the elements with the tabletop miniatures. It's pretty great, but not perfect. Warhammer itself is addictive, and these days a very expensive hobby. Taking the time and care to make and paint your models, then tabletop gaming with friends using your own personal army tailored to your tastes. It's all awesome, but not always do the computer games recapture all of the magic. My main beef with Chaos Gate is that, Christ, at times the game borders on repetitive and monotonous, and you really feel it about 20 or 30 hours in. But it's all about commanding the Grey Knight Space Marines, holding back the growing threat of the dirty Death God Chaos Forces of Nurgle. We don't see represented that often in Warhammer 40,000 computer games, so it's kind of weird for me seeing some of their units alive and animated for the very first time, like the creepy Blight Haulers. They're a lot more flexible and cartoony than I imagined.
Your knights must be ready, Commander. The time has come.
So this new Chaos Gate is mostly good. It's impossible not to compare this game to XCOM. It is squad-based, turn-based strategy in a very similar vein. One of the biggest standout differences to me was that weapons have a 100% hit chance by default, provided things are in line of sight. I think I prefer this change. It removes some of that randomness that used to suck in XCOM, when an attack would have an over 90% chance to hit and it still misses. That never felt good. Another nice little addition are Aegis Shields. At the cost of Space Marines' ability points, you can activate their Aegis Shields, which you can use to play defensively and hunker down, or use the extra armor to safely make more aggressive plays. There's also my favourite elements of these kind of turn-based strategy games. That is the crew and ship management side of the game. You'll manage your own regiment of Space Marines, and you'll be able to freely customise them, and you can have a lot of fun naming them after friends and praying they don't get blown to bits, because they're each going to have their own little stories. Some good stories, and some tragic stories. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. The actual customization options are mixed. There's some decent options, like 10 voices to choose from, but what really hurts the customization is the lack of being able to adjust the colours of units. You've got to stick to that very strict Grey Knights colour scheme. I can't have my squad of Power Rangers like in XCOM. While on your ship, you can manage resources, perform research, upgrades, repairs, and every so often make important decisions that might have a mix of positive and detrimental effects to your campaign. You'll regularly have to answer to your Grand Master, who can be a bit of a dick and might leave you handicapped for a little while. Visuals are obviously a big step up from the original 1998 Chaos Gate. You often get these cinematic camera angles for some of the actions and they're pretty glorious. You get zoom-ins on grenades or events in slow motion. It's in these cinematic moments that you get to really appreciate how nice the battlefields look, and I love seeing all sorts of decapitated body parts blown off and flying about. I kind of just really appreciate the lighting and bloom effects. There's after effects of nearby battles invading the screen, growths of Nurgle gardens slowly creeping into locations, and then there's your ship, which is just oozing with atmosphere and detail. Just look at those old man wrinkles. It all seems pretty great, but after about 20 to 30 hours of repeating very similar skirmish missions, the monotony really starts to sink in. You'll eventually get a few story missions and you'll have to hunt down Reapers in pretty decent little boss fights, but the majority of the game is rerunning these skirmishes over and over again, trying to slow down the invading Death Guard. I eventually maxed out my Space Marines levels so there weren't any experience points to look forward to, which just added to the monotony of repeating these missions with a lack of rewards. This is Mark. After about 30 hours of building Mark up as a super soldier Terminator who's never been fatally injured, I got the opportunity to send him away for a month to be promoted into a Paladin. About a week later, I get a message that he somehow died on the journey. I'm disappointed in you, Mark. You are a complete waste and removed from my campaign. I don't know, I thought it was a bit cheap considering he still had all 5 of his lives, but he's just randomly dead now after building him up the majority of my campaign. Now what's really weird is that in the tutorial missions you fight another subset of Chaos Demons, Khorne, but we never see these ever again. For the rest of the game we instead fight the forces of Nurgle, the Death Guard. I'm speculating maybe these Khorne forces might make a comeback in some DLC. I'm kind of sad we didn't see more of the Khorne in the campaign. Chaos Gate has been generally well received with a mostly positive consensus. People report a few bugs and performance issues that I've fortunately not experienced. But one thing that did bug me was the lack of any kind of warping out animations when missions ended. It just rolls the victory screen. I should mention there is an animation for warping into missions, just not one for the warp out. Overall, I'd recommend Chaos Gate Demon Hunters. Gameplay is kinda fun, story missions are pretty great, but the regular skirmish missions get really monotonous at times. For me, those repetitive skirmish missions are the major downside, and you'll really need to push through them to get to those better story missions. At the same time, it's not a full price game, so in my opinion, it gives it a little leeway. You're going to want to check this out if you've got any interest in XCOM or Warhammer 40k. There's Astartes Space Marines and the Death Guard do get a lot of love here. Peace for now.